Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for the City of Fairway on Monday, October 25th, 2021. Before we get started with the agenda items for this evening, we need to do some housekeeping, which will be approval of the minutes from our last meeting on July 26th, 2021. Those minutes have been distributed by Ms. Young, and so the chair would ask for a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes have been adopted as presented. We don't have any old business, so tonight we have new business, which is a public hearing to consider a variance request to encroach, I believe, 12 feet into the required minimum side street setback on a corner lot for a fence. This application has been submitted by Caleb George of Chris George Homes on behalf of Michael Helmuth and Jennifer Inman, the property owners, for certain real estate located at 5900 El Monte in Fairway, Kansas. And I would ask now Mr. Alani to make his report to the board regarding the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. The applicant submitted this application requesting that variance as far as the setback. So the background, it's a brand new house. It was built. Actually, they are on a temporary right now. So the setback, the side setback is 18 feet. For the fence, the language in the code requires it needs to be minimum of 12 feet. So the applicant is proposing to, or requesting that variance. The staff is in support of that. Police chief went out and drove by just with the recommendation to see if there's any issues with the site at the, since it's a corner lot, and the director of public works went out too, and they did not have an issue with putting a wrought iron fence. So the applicant is requesting that variance.
So is the staff in favor of the variance?
Yes, we are.
Okay. And it looks like in the staff recommendation, you've recommended that the variance be granted subject to adoption of two recommendations. One, that the building permit be obtained and fees paid, and that the application is void if the permit's not obtained within 1 year of the date of approval, correct?
That's correct.
Does anyone on the board here have any questions of Mr. Alani?
Basil, I have a question. So the deck is existing, correct?
No, it's brand new.
Okay, so the deck's going to be new, and the reason for the variance is to allow a gate next to the deck?
Yeah, they wanted to enclose the backyard.
Okay.
The code is a little bit, you can encroach, the building can encroach into the setback, but the fence is specific, saying it has to be within 12 feet of the back of the curb. So that's where the confusion is.
And how many feet will it be from the back of the curb to the
12 feet, about 12, 6
Okay.
inches.
And it's supposed to be 18?
No, the setback is 18. That's where, like, if you do the numbers for the lot is 18, but it's technically 24 from the center of the street.
Kim, were the neighbors appropriately notified?
Yes, Chair, they were.
And has any neighbor objected to this?
I've received no comments. So,
Any other board members have questions of Mr. Alani about this? Hearing none, is there someone here to speak on behalf of this, on the applicant, but for the applicant?
Yes.
If so, come forward. Could you give us your name and address, please?
Caleb George, 6830 Beverly, Overland Park, Kansas, 66204. Yeah, and we request this variance, when we permitted the house, new construction for a tear down, it was done on spec. Buyers came in towards the end of the project when it was listed, and, you know, basically added, you know, wanted to add a fence. So we received a permit for the, kind of the three sides of it already, and then we were waiting on a variance to see if we were able to capture more of the yard for their dogs. You know, and it's consistent with several other corner houses down the street from them, in terms of its setback off the road, if we were to receive the variance. If we were not to receive the variance, it would make for a very awkward fence to deck, the current deck that was permitted before the fence connection. So that's kind of where we were kind of left in a little limbo on it, and that's why, you know, we feel the variance would be appropriate and would add a lot to this, to the buyer's property.
So our statutory mission in granting any variance is governed by the 5 factors, which we have asked you to respond to in writing. And it's a little bit legalistic, it's a little bit formalistic, I grant you, but we do have to kind of walk through. And one of the things I thought might be helpful is I'm gonna maybe paraphrase what I think the statutory requirements are, and then ask you to maybe refer to your answer here, so we can go through. We all have the answers, but do you think that this variance request arises from a certain condition of your property that's unique?
Yes, we do.
And tell me why that is.
It's specific to the corner property and the house placement on the lot in order to build the house that's appropriate for that lot, for the price point of the neighborhood, and then making sure we capture an amount of fenced-in yard that would be appropriate for that.
And do you think if we were to grant the variance, it would adversely affect your neighbors in any way?
No, we do not.
If we were to say no and strictly apply the zoning ordinance, would that work a hardship on you? And if so, what would the hardship be?
It would, again, set the rear yard valued property for, or valued yard space for any owner. It would set that at a smaller footage than most of the neighbors.
Would that impact your use and enjoyment of the property?
It would, specifically for the owners wanting to have that for more space for their dog.
I assume you would say that this variance request, if we granted it, wouldn't adversely affect the public welfare.
Correct, yes.
Okay. And again, I think you don't believe that if we were to grant this variance, it would be against the general spirit and intent of the zoning ordinances.
No, I don't think so at all.
Okay. And again, I'll say you've given written answers to these questions, which I think are part of the record, but I think you've, in summary fashion, outlined for us why you think this variance is appropriate. And so now I'll surrender the mic and let anybody else on the board ask any questions of the applicant.
I do have a question. So the fence is being put up not because of the people, but because of the dog, correct?
I wasn't indicated, they led me to believe like they need a fenced-in yard specifically for their dog, but my assumption is, we do have a homeowner present, I could ask him for more clarification. My assumption is it would probably benefit their dog and themselves, for just their peace of mind, having a little bit larger yard.
Okay, so the dog, not knowing what size the dog is this fence gonna be adequate for the dog? I mean, are they gonna have to put a blockade up or of some sort to prevent the dog from going underneath, or?
No, I do not believe so. They're moving from a fenced-in yard and they haven't had any issues with
Well, I think
their
that's a
dog.
question we need to answer. I mean, if it's
Oh.
a small dog, you know, with the fence, if the fence is, you know, if at some point they decide to block it off, that may be of an issue to some of the neighbors.
Okay. I mean,
Cosmetically, you mean?
Pardon?
Cosmetic issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cosmetically, you know, a wrought iron fence doesn't block sight, and
Correct, yeah.
typically aesthetically pleasing and so forth, but in some cases, wrought iron fences don't contain the dog.
Yeah, I think that would be accurate, depending on the size of the dog. So if we can have the homeowner answer, I'm sure he'd be happy to shed some light on that. I'm not 100% familiar with what type of dog he has.
That's really my only concern is that does the wrought iron fence turn into some other type of fence later on? That may be objectionable to the neighbors or sightline or something else.
Kim, if the fence as erected creates some kind of a cosmetic issue, is there a provision of the code that would deal with that?
So, based on what if the BZA were to grant a variance and stipulate wrought iron's acceptable, down the road, if someone wanted to do a privacy, they would not be able to do that. They would have to keep it wrought iron unless they came back to BZA, because that was a stipulation of your approval. Now, legal non-conforming fences that existed prior to the code are allowed to be replaced as they exist with the same materials. You will see some corner lots where fences go right to, a sidewalk or a curb. And as long as they don't change the style or the height or encroach further, they're allowed to go back as they exist. So if you just grant it as a fence with no specific stipulation, I think staff down the road would say pretty much any fence could go in that meets code based on the location that the variance was granted for.
So we need to stipulate, if we were to consider it, that it's this specific wrought iron fence.
If you want your variance to hinge on anything specifically, like we're granting the variance, but it must be.
But it doesn't have to.
It would have to be if you're stipulating, if you just say.
No, we don't have to
Oh,
stipulate
no,
if we
you-
don't want
no,
to.
No, you don't. If you just say, yeah, the location's good for any fence that conforms to the other regulations, that would be okay, yes.
And I have a question. Now, there is a privacy fence along the west and the south sides, is that correct? And even that little bit between the house and the south property line?
That's correct, yes.
And so what you're talking about is having this wrought iron fence off of the deck and then along the street and then back down to the privacy fence?
Yes, tying into the privacy fence, that's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions of the applicant?
Well, I have a general question. Are we asking for a fence or are we asking for a wrought iron fence? What's the request in the variance?
A wrought iron fence. Wrought iron fence. I was gonna say, for simplicity, I would prefer just to have it as a fence, but if that needs to be a stipulation, it doesn't sound like there's an issue with that.
Any more questions for the applicant? Anybody else here to speak on behalf of this application for or against? Just give us your name and address, please.
I'm Mike Helmuth, 5900 El Monte. The wrought iron fence is 4 feet. It's the same fence that we had with the dog before. She's about 65 pounds, and she better like it. So, if I have any other questions, we'd be glad to. It's really important to be able to look out onto the side, and it is not a blocked fence. It goes kind of around some trees and then in the right of way, and everybody can see in the yard, and we can see out of the yard, so.
Thank you. So I think that concludes the application and public comment portion. So I guess we'll now have conversation among ourselves about this. Doug Huffman, are you there?
I can't get him, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, let's see, let's start with Amy then. Amy, you're on the end. What are your thoughts, Amy?
I feel like they have met the 5 requirements, and I feel like we as
I agree with Amy. We do meet the requirements. And I think that it would help because to make the record so that there's no question later on that this is the requirement, even though, it may change in the future. So I'm in favor of this.
Marcia?
I think the criteria have been met, but I do not think we should stipulate that it should be wrought iron. I would think a general fence approval would be enough.
Bill?
The requirements seem to be met, and I would like to stipulate a wrought iron fence on it.
Okay. Well, I do believe that the criteria have been met, and I think it's probably reasonable to stipulate here that it be a wrought iron fence, as the landowner has indicated. If circumstances change in the future, why the landowner or a subsequent owner can come back, I think, and seek some relief. So, and I think that's probably the consensus of the board. So, at this point, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the variance, subject to 3 conditions. One, that it be a 4-foot wrought iron fence, as described here by the applicant. And secondly, that the building permit be obtained and fees paid as required by the city code, and that this application and variance would be void if a building permit is not obtained within 1 year of the date of the BZA approval. So is there a motion to that effect?
I so move.
Is there a second? Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none, I guess we'll call for a vote. So all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? So the variance is granted, subject to the 3 conditions that we've imposed. So thank you all for coming out here and making a nice and succinct presentation for us. Kim, it doesn't look like there's any additional business for us tonight, and our next meeting is set for November 29th, is that correct?
Chair, that is correct, and they have till October 29th to get applications in.
And so far, we don't have any.
Okay. So at this point, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second? Any discussion? All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Does anybody ever oppose adjourning a meeting?
You know, we actually don't even have to do that motion, but
I found this in the other papers. I was gonna throw it away. It was tagged.
oh, you may have it.
No, I can't steal paper.
It was attached with everything else, and I was just.
Well, I can't,
was
we
bumbling
just,
through
was
it.
so brief, we just barely got
It's just really important, right?
I thought, I better
You have your money.
So, okay, great, thanks. I got you.
Now, am I supposed to fill out something for you?
Oh, that's right. So I'll make a copy of that.
Everything's a sense.
Okay, I'll just make a copy.
And I'm not moving until I die,
Okay.
but I am in business next year too.
Yes,
I
okay,
don't know how many years.
okay. I will,
Eventually, my clients are gonna allow me to retire.
yeah. Well, maybe you'll want to retire.
Well, it's been very, it's been good. Well, I actually answered the client's questions about everything, so. I thought it may be more type person than it is. No, we traveled. And then I worked for a big developer out of Dallas. No, 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 no. You know, for example, they're building, they do a lot of franchise work.
Okay.
So one of their clients is Jiffy, the developer or owner building, wants to build Jiffy. So he has 100 Jiffys. So they find the property, they do the due diligence. And part of the diligence is to get your technical report. So get one from Paragon or Giles or CS or PSI in draft form, and then make comments. I issue comments. Most of the comments that I make are, at least half the comments are, these recommendations you should.
So how was CFS doing?
This is stuff I wrote, or kind of did some research on for the solar panels. It's certainly not inclusive,
Yeah, he's
but I
pretty good.
thought
I
I'd
mean,
just go over it with
He's sharp,
everybody.
but you had all the connections though.
Well, I still in retainer, and I can.
And this didn't get included in the budget, but it's kind of.
Yeah, because I don't think he brought any of his clients. Because, yeah.
But see, I don't do design, because I don't care about building. So if I have a design project that to do, I do with CMS, Adam designs it.
Okay.
Like this one here, I'm actually designing.
Okay.
Adam, with Adam.
This is some research I did on solar panels. It wasn't in the packet, so. And I need.
How you doing?
Typically do not have my name.
And
It keeps me involved.
And you, you're with HOK, right? Populous, that's right.
Done a couple of
I get the two mixed up sometimes. Right. The guys split
one
off.
more year of work, one more year, and then it's out.
And move out of here.
need two more
No,
sets.
no moving. I have 7 grandkids with.
Yeah.
No. That would go over good. Well, I'm gonna go grab dinner.
All right, good seeing you.
Glad to see you guys.
All right.
Did I get it? Were you here for BZA? Was this the only thing in front of it, this fence? That is you, yeah. Where are they putting it? Way out here at the property line, or are they putting it off the deck?
I think it's is it the property line, Basel?
It's almost.
My sister-in-law, Nora, is a very good friend of my wife.
So it's like 12 feet.
The way the curve. My house is like the forest right on the place. From the street side property line. Property line.
Shaker's bumped over there.
So you're talking about a 4-foot back even from that. So, yeah. I agree, that might be something that workers at some point start getting. Last year.
Oh, it's heading in a good direction again.
I sent you an email for the last one.
I got it. Yeah.
Oh, really?